You've also donated to several Democratic candidates, Hillary Clinton included, Nancy Pelosi. You explained away those donations, saying you did that to get business-related favors. And you said recently, quote, when you give, they do whatever the hell you want them to do.
You better believe it.
So what specifically did they do?
If I ask them, if I need them, you know, most of the people on this stage I've given to, just so you understand. A lot of money.
Not me.
Not me.
Welcome back to the Eclectic Traveler Podcast! This is the 9th edition, and yes, it's been almost a year since the last podcast, so without further ado, let's start.
The author of this podcast claims no absolute truth of anything. The intention is only to share his views. If you start feeling upset or disturbed, please apply abundantly mainstream media opinions and make sure to drink plenty of political fallacies. Enjoy.
It's almost 2016, and presidential elections here in the United States are a year from now.
Tuesday, November 8th, 2016, to be exact.
Whether we like it or not, the fate of the world will be decided by whoever wins the position of the 45th President of the United States,
AKA
the most powerful executive head of state in the world. Right now, there is a free run for the presidency between two new candidates. This election, however, is quite a bit more interesting. A reality show, saying that contemporary politics is the oldest form of such. People cheering for delusional promises and politicians extending the bar of ridicule and extremism to be always trending. It appears that the topic of immigration is the way for many current right-wing presidential candidates to justify most of the socioeconomic problems, thus making it the best platform to gain popular acceptance. By now, we all know who burst into unexpected popularity by mentioning this topic in a matter that is full of fallacies, and many felt it like common sense, thus giving him the prime of the media, creating an overwhelming advantage over all the contestants. This one is none other than my main man, Donald Trump. At the beginning, many believed he was the dumbest person to run for presidency, that he was going to be the comic relief of debates and gatherings, but many undermined him as quite a shark. He's very charismatic, and his unseemly skills on how to manage his own controversial opinions are very surprising. He's sort of an artist because he appears as though he is playing the dumb card all the time, where you might think he does not ponder what he states, but he is completely the opposite. It's like an unexpected version of House of Cards.
The road to power is paved with hypocrisy and casualties.
Think with me for a second. On one hand, the Huffington Post states that anything dealing with Donald Trump will go from the political section to the entertainment section, while on the other hand, Republican Party candidates are leaning more and more to whatever he comes up and says, even changing the Constitution. I know that we have heard almost everything Donald Trump has said so far, but let's quickly recap some of the things he has said.
You've called women you don't like fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals.
On 4 occasions, I've taken advantage of the laws of this country, like other people.
And I would build a wall like nobody can build a wall. You know, nobody can build a fence like me, David. You know that. I built great buildings all over the world. There's nobody can build a fence, and I would have Mexico pay for it, believe me. They will pay for it, because they have really ripped this country off. They have really taken advantage of us. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people. And it only makes common sense.
Let's hear an insight from one of my favorite politicians, Ron Paul.
Is Donald Trump good or bad for the Republican Party?
Well, I don't even care whether he's good or bad for the Republican Party. I don't have much interest in that per se, but I think he's a dangerous person. And a lot of people find him sort of funny, and they love him, even, libertarian type.
Why is he dangerous?
Well, they like him because he's so disruptive, to the party system, and I enjoy that too. But I think he is a man that, if conditions deteriorate, which they can, and if those conditions come, people want to be told, what to kind of do. And I know what the answers is, and I'll do this, and I am the man to do this. And he comes across very well, and people listen to him. And I believe that he may be raising white horses someplace, and he's going to ride in, because he is almost the opposite of a libertarian. But he sounds like the person that I know the answers, and I'm going to do this, and I've done this. I'm this, and this.
An authoritarian, as you talk about authoritarian.
He's an authoritarian, and that's the way he claims he's made all his money. So I see that as dangerous.
Ron Paul, libertarian, doesn't like this talk of I have all the answers. He believes that the people should have the answers. You can disagree with Ron Paul's policies, but he does want to disperse power, whereas Donald Trump wants to collect power, right? And does Donald Trump have any ideology? No, he doesn't have an ideology, man. His main driving principle is Donald Trump.
Let me take this one really quick. Hello, the Eclectic Traveler Podcast. Who am I speaking with?
And I'm going to sue you if I have to. Do you understand me?
Hello, Mr. Trump. I'm sorry, I guess...
Yes, I hung up. You didn't get disconnected. I hung up. You're fired.
So, is illegal immigration getting worse? Is it really the disease that will bring this institutionally complex country to economic apocalypse? Is this gradually a form of white genocide, as many argue? And how much of a necessary evil it really is? I argue one thing. There is no intrinsic moral in it. We cannot label it as naturally evil nor naturally good. Lately, Donald Trump said this.
Speaking to NBC's Chuck Todd on his private plane, Trump said the United States has no choice but to get rid of birthright citizenship.
You want to get rid of birthright citizenship?
You have to get rid of it, yes. You have to. What they're doing, they're having a baby, and all of a sudden nobody knows.
You believe
have no choice.
That they're trying to do this. They're coming here.
Let me tell you, when we have some good people, we have some very good people here. We have a lot of really good people. They're illegal. You either have a country or not.
And immediately other political presidential candidates like Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, Lindsey Graham, and Rand Paul, Senator of Kentucky, both presidential candidates. It's interesting that in order to accomplish this action, there has to be a re-amendment on the Constitution. The original amendment that gives and establishes the right of citizenship to whoever is born within the country's boundaries or by parents or figures, so to speak, was placed in the Constitution for around 147 years, dating right after the Civil War.
July 9th, 1868.
So the notion that this right has created a crisis would mean that there has been a crisis for 147 years. To simply re-amend the Constitution and bring a new set of laws is dangerous. But these days, having popular support can really bring unexpected turnouts. Have you heard of the Dred Scott decision? It was a U.S. Supreme Court decision where African Americans could not be American citizens for not coming from the right bloodline. And that is very much what Trump's policies sound like, but targeted to children of undocumented immigrants. Let's hear this view.
Citizenship. Joining us from Washington, D.C. is Ian Millhiser, Senior Fellow at the Center for American Progress Action Fund and the editor of Think Progress Justice. He's the author of the book Injustices, the Supreme Court's history of comforting the comfortable and afflicting the afflicted. He recently wrote a piece headlined, Donald Trump's First Policy Plan is even more racist than you think it is. Ian, explain.
Sure. So this idea of eliminating birthright citizenship, this goes back to the worst Supreme Court decision in American history, the Dred Scott decision. Dred Scott said that citizenship is something that essentially is a hereditary right. It flows from people who are the sort of people who were citizens at the founding. And if you have the right bloodline, then you get to be a citizen. If you don't have the right bloodline, and what they meant in Dred Scott was the descendants of African slaves, then you don't get to be a citizen. Donald Trump wants to bring this notion of tainted bloodlines back. Now, here he's not talking about the descendants of African slaves. He's talking about the descendants of undocumented immigrants. But it's the same offensive notion that drove that Dred Scott decision, that citizenship is something that comes only to people with privileged blood, that is driving this proposal.
So, in other words, Trump's immigration plan, he's in favor of family reunification by deporting everyone, the parents, right, the grown youths, the babies, but by removing their birthright citizenship as well.
That's right. I mean, it's a hugely cruel plan. You know, he wants mass deportation. I've seen estimates as much as $600 billion worth of deportations he's pushing. He wants, one way that he said, I mean, there's so many cruelties laden in this proposal. One thing that he wants to do is to get rid of remittances, where families come over to the United States, or part of a family comes over to the United States, they work, and then they send money back to their abysmally poor families in the nation they came from. He wants to get rid of that. So, you know, his idea here is to hold families together in abject poverty, and then, of course, to keep them from being able to be in the United States while they're suffering through that poverty.
As of 2014, there were roughly 11.3 million unauthorized immigrants in the United States. That is, as of 2015, roughly 3 to 3.5% of the total USA population. Allow me to add that in the last 5 years, this, let's say, 3.5% of illegal population has remained essentially stable. Mexicans make up about half of all unauthorized immigrants, 52%, though their numbers have been declining in recent years. And by the way, unauthorized immigrants populations from South America and Europe/Canada did not change significantly. Information taken by U.S. official release numbers together with pewresearch.org. Unauthorized immigrants make up 5.1% of the U.S. labor force. Obama got the Latino vote, it's quite clear. But that is not the reason illegal immigration has been stable for the last 5 years. One of the reasons is Obama deporting more immigrants than any other president in this country's history. Department of Homeland Security counts to be close to the 2 million deportation mark.
You know, it wasn't too long ago. I was there on the campaign trail working as a local news reporter when then Senator Obama told an entire auditorium of Hispanic voters that he wanted and would get comprehensive immigration reform passed. And you know what? Maybe he really did intend to. But the numbers show that under President Obama, more than any other president, more undocumented immigrants have been deported. As far as the SCOM program, there was previously an opt-out option for state and local governments. No more. This is the across-the-board policy that was not voted on by lawmakers. It was simply enacted.
According to ICE, after 4 years in office, President Obama deported more than 1.5 million immigrants. At this pace, he will have deported more immigrants than any other president in American history, often separating mothers from their children. And we should point out that the great migration of undocumented workers into this country is declining due to increasing job opportunities south of the border and fewer jobs here in the United States. We're joined by Michael Kaufman, who is an attorney with the ACLU, and he joins us from Los Angeles. In the American criminal justice system, due process includes the right to a lawyer, and if we can't afford a lawyer, one will be provided to us for free. Does that guarantee apply to America's immigration court?
Unfortunately, it does not. The immigration proceedings are considered civil in nature, and the Sixth Amendment right to an attorney in your criminal proceedings does not apply as a rule in that context. And what that means is that the vast majority of people who face deportation charges go without a lawyer and are forced to face the immigration courts and a trained DHS, Department of Homeland Security prosecutor on their own. Now, immigration law is incredibly complicated. It's been referred to as second only in complexity to the tax code because the consequences are so drastic. In some cases, deportation is a far more severe penalty than anything you would face in criminal court.
They're often separating mothers from children.
Certainly, families get torn apart every single day. We see hundreds of families that are torn apart because of the enormous pace at which the Obama administration is deporting individuals. People that have lived in the United States their entire lives and, may have committed no offenses or may have committed something very minor, but otherwise been a contributing member to their families, to their communities, to their society here in the United States. And yet we tear them out from their roots here in the United States and deport them for such minor offenses.
So why are these people like Donald Trump saying otherwise? Easy. Politics, like in any other country, is just a game that is played with uninformed masses by deceiving and manipulating popular intuition. It is not the first time in US history and in any other country where a minority is the one blamed for the economic and social hardships of that state. Let's go back in time and see if we find some similarities with recent Latin American immigrants. During the 1870s, Chinese immigrants bore the brunt of blame for economic calamity that ushered in a linked post-Civil War depression in the United States. The public anger led to the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1881.
Chinese immigrants began flooding into the United States in the 1850s, attracted by opportunities in the American West. They were escaping poverty and unrest in China and filling jobs in the new American mining and railroad industries.
And they were considered to be very pliable labor, very inexpensive labor, labor that would work no matter what the circumstances were, no matter how dangerous it was.
Within 30 years, about 200,000 Chinese had settled in the U.S. But by the 1870s, a backlash against them had grown large and violent.
They faced a lot of discrimination, a lot of racial intolerance because they were seen as working for lower wages, taking jobs at a time when unemployment was 25, 30% in some communities. The Chinese become the scapegoat for American workers on the West Coast, especially, for all the economic troubles.
The railroad companies turned against Chinese workers after they began to organize for better pay and a shorter workday. In 1867, when 5,000 Chinese Central Pacific Railroad workers went on strike, the company simply cut off their food supplies until the starving workers agreed to return to work 1 week later.
And so there's the throw the Chinese out movement. Labor unions line up with it. The American Workingmen's Party is founded principally on this issue, and they pressure Congress, and Congress eventually agrees to pass its first immigration restriction law in 1882, explicitly targeting Chinese immigrants as undesirables.
The Chinese Exclusion Act banned Chinese laborers from immigrating to the United States for 10 years. It also prevented the Chinese already in the U.S. from becoming citizens. Congress renewed the law in 1892 and made it permanent in 1902. It was not until 1943 that the act was repealed, allowing Chinese immigration and granting citizenship to Chinese nationals already residing in the country. But by then, many once thriving Chinese communities in the U.S. had nearly disappeared.
Vous venez écouter les voyageurs éclectiques.